"Officer, the red SUV caused the crash." The woman's voice was clear. Steady. Impossible to mistake. But Officer Daniel Brooks never looked up from his notebook. "Ma'am. I'll need you to wait." The afternoon traffic at the intersection of Peachtree Street and 10th Street had ground to a standstill. Car horns echoed through downtown Atlanta. Drivers leaned out their windows trying to see what had happened. A delivery truck blocked one lane. A city bus sat motionless behind it. Red and blue emergency lights reflected across nearby office buildings. Only minutes earlier, two vehicles had collided in the middle of the intersection. No one appeared seriously injured. But witnesses were everywhere. And every one of them had a different version of the story. Officer Daniel Brooks moved methodically from driver to driver. Late 30s. Dark navy patrol uniform. Body camera recording. Notebook already half full. He had worked traffic investigations long enough to know one thing. The loudest witness was rarely the most reliable. Behind the yellow traffic cones, a woman waited patiently. She wore black running shorts. A fitted white athletic tank top. Light gray running shoes. A lightweight running jacket tied around her waist. Sweat still glistened across her forehead. Her breathing had almost returned to normal. She had clearly been finishing an afternoon run when everything happened. Her name was Maya Johnson. 31 years old. An elementary school counselor. Every afternoon after work, she ran the same route through Midtown before driving home. Today, her routine had ended with the sound of twisting metal. She watched Officer Brooks finish speaking with another driver. Then politely stepped forward. "Officer. I saw the entire accident." Daniel looked up briefly. "You were driving?" "No. I was waiting for the crosswalk signal." He nodded. "I'll get to pedestrian witnesses in a minute." "I understand." She stepped back without arguing. Several nearby drivers continued talking over each other. She came out of nowhere. No, the pickup crossed first. The light was yellow. It was already red. Daniel wrote carefully. None of the statements matched. Nothing unusual about that. Traffic collisions almost never came with perfect witnesses. A few moments later, Maya approached again. This time her voice was quieter. "The red SUV. It went through the red light." Daniel sighed softly. "Ma'am. I appreciate you wanting to help. But I need confirmed facts." She blinked. "I am giving you one." He looked directly at her. "Did you actually see the impact?" "Yes. I watched the SUV enter the intersection. It never slowed down." Daniel closed his notebook for a second. His tone remained professional. "I'm not saying you're lying. But right now I have 3 drivers giving different accounts. I need evidence." Maya nodded. "So do I." She pointed toward the intersection. "That's why I'm trying to tell you where to look." Daniel followed her gesture only briefly. The damaged sedan. The pickup truck. Broken plastic scattered across the asphalt. Nothing immediately stood out. He looked back at Maya. "I'll review nearby traffic cameras. If they confirm your statement, we'll include it." She gave a small nod. "Fair enough." Daniel returned to interviewing another witness. As he walked away, 2 bystanders standing near a coffee shop exchanged quiet comments. "I think she's just guessing. Everybody thinks they saw something." Another man shrugged. "People always want to be part of the story." Maya heard every word. She didn't respond. Years spent counseling children had taught her something important. People often spoke before they truly understood. Correcting them rarely helped. Facts eventually did. She simply watched the intersection. Patiently. Silently, Officer Brooks continued reconstructing the collision. Measurements. Photographs. Vehicle positions. Everything followed procedure. Yet something bothered Maya. Not about the accident itself. About the vehicle that caused it. The red SUV. Its driver remained inside. Hands gripping the steering wheel. Head lowered. Several officers assumed she was shaken. Perhaps she was. But Maya wasn't watching the driver. She was watching the back seat. The SUV's rear windows were darkly tinted. Even from across the intersection, something felt wrong. She narrowed her eyes. For just a moment, she thought she saw movement. Small movement. Low inside the vehicle. Almost hidden behind the front passenger seat. She took one cautious step forward. Officer Brooks. He continued writing. "One moment, please." She spoke again. A little louder. "I really think you should check the SUV." Daniel looked up. "The fire department is already on the way." "It's not that." "What is it?" She hesitated. Because she wasn't certain. "Not yet. I think. There may be someone else inside." Daniel glanced toward the SUV. Then back at Maya. The rear windows were nearly impossible to see through. "I don't see anyone." "You wouldn't from here." His expression remained calm. "Ma'am. The driver told us she was alone." Maya looked back toward the vehicle. Her instincts refused to settle. "I don't think she is." Daniel offered a polite but measured smile. "I'll have another officer check once EMS arrives. Right now I need to finish documenting the collision." He turned away once more. Maya didn't call after him. She didn't insist. She didn't argue. Instead, she kept looking toward the SUV. The afternoon sun reflected across the rear window. For a brief second, the glare shifted. And through the glass, she caught sight of something small. A green dinosaur backpack. Then, what looked like the top of a child's head. Maya's heartbeat quickened. Because if she was right, someone inside that SUV still hadn't been counted. Maya Johnson couldn't look away from the red SUV. The afternoon sun shifted just enough for the reflection on the rear window to disappear. This time, she saw it clearly. A small hand. Tiny fingers pressed lightly against the inside of the glass. Then, the green dinosaur backpack she had noticed only seconds earlier. Her pulse quickened. There was definitely a child inside. She immediately turned toward Officer Daniel Brooks. "Officer." Daniel looked up from his accident report. "What is it?" "There's a little boy in the back seat." Daniel glanced toward the SUV. The driver remained seated behind the wheel. Airbags hung from the steering wheel and dashboard. Nothing appeared unusual. The driver already told us she was alone. Maya shook her head. "She isn't. I saw him." Daniel frowned. "The rear windows are heavily tinted." "I know. But the sunlight shifted. I saw a child." Officer Brooks looked toward the SUV once more. Still, he couldn't see anyone. Around them, paramedics had just arrived and were checking on the occupants of the other damaged vehicles. Traffic officers were beginning to redirect cars around the intersection. Everyone's attention remained focused on the collision. No one was watching the red SUV anymore. Daniel spoke calmly. "Ma'am. The EMTs will check every vehicle in a minute. You don't need to worry." Maya's eyes never left the SUV. "I'm already worried." A light breeze carried the faint smell of something unusual. Not gasoline. Not burning rubber from the crash. Something sharper. Almost electrical. She frowned. Then took a slow breath. There it was again. A faint smell of overheated plastic. She immediately looked toward the front of the SUV. A thin ribbon of gray smoke drifted upward from the edge of the hood. Barely noticeable. Easy to mistake for steam. Most people did. Maya didn't. Years earlier, before becoming a school counselor, she had volunteered with a community emergency response team. One of the first lessons she had learned was simple. Smoke and steam didn't move the same way. Steam disappeared quickly. Smoke lingered. This lingered. She stepped forward. Officer Brooks. His pen stopped moving. The SUV is smoking. Daniel looked up. It's probably steam from the radiator. Maybe. But maybe it isn't. He followed her gaze. The smoke remained thin. Nothing alarming. No flames. No loud noises. Just a faint gray line rising into the warm Georgia air. One firefighter noticed it too. He pointed toward the vehicle while speaking into his radio. Their engine, however, was still blocked by stopped traffic nearly a block away. It would take another minute to reach the SUV. Maya looked back toward the rear window. This time, she saw movement again. The child shifted in the safety seat. A small face appeared briefly between the headrests. The little boy looked frightened. He wasn't crying. He simply looked confused. And he was still strapped in. Maya's heartbeat accelerated. She called out loudly. There's a child in the back. Several people finally turned toward the SUV. Officer Brooks looked again. Still, the dark glass hid almost everything. The driver opened her door slightly. She looked shaken. Disoriented. One hand rested against her forehead. She seemed unaware of what Maya was saying. Daniel walked toward her. Ma'am. Are you okay? The woman nodded weakly. My head. She sounded dazed. Then her eyes suddenly widened. My son. She turned toward the back seat. Her expression changed instantly. Ethan. She reached for the rear door handle. It wouldn't open. She pulled again. Nothing. The side impact had bent part of the frame. The rear door remained stuck. Panic spread across her face. My baby. She pulled harder. The handle wouldn't move. Maya didn't hesitate. She ran toward the SUV. Behind her. Officer Brooks raised his voice. Ma'am. Please stay back. But Maya had already reached the rear passenger door. She looked through the window. A little boy. Maybe 6 years old. Still buckled safely into his child's seat. Eyes wide. Terrified. Smoke continued drifting from beneath the hood. Still no flames. But the smell of burning plastic had become stronger. Maya tried the rear door. Locked tight. She immediately moved to the opposite side. That door opened. The little boy looked at her. He didn't cry. He simply whispered, Mom. Maya smiled gently. It's okay. I'm going to help you. She leaned inside. Carefully reached for the child's seat buckle. Her fingers worked quickly but calmly. Outside. Officer Brooks had reached the vehicle. He stopped for a split second. Watching Maya calmly reassuring the child instead of panicking. The buckle released with a soft click. Maya lifted the little boy into her arms. Holding him securely against her shoulder. Just as she stepped back onto the sidewalk, the first firefighters arrived beside the SUV. They immediately positioned a fire extinguisher near the engine compartment. Within seconds, they confirmed a small electrical fire had begun beneath the hood. It was quickly contained before it could spread. No explosion. No dramatic inferno. Just enough heat and smoke to make one fact painfully clear. If the child had remained inside much longer, the situation could have become far more dangerous. The little boy wrapped both arms around Maya's neck. His mother rushed over the moment paramedics helped her from the driver's seat. She embraced her son with tears streaming down her face. "I thought he got out. I thought someone already had him." She couldn't finish the sentence. Officer Brooks stood a few feet away. Silent. The accident report was still tucked beneath his arm. For the first time that afternoon, he wasn't thinking about traffic laws. Or witness statements. Or paperwork. He was thinking about the woman he had dismissed only minutes earlier. The woman he believed was mistaken, had been the only person who noticed the child everyone else had overlooked. For a long moment, no one spoke. The only sounds at the intersection were the steady hum of traffic being redirected, the quiet voices of paramedics, and the little boy crying softly against his mother's shoulder. Officer Daniel Brooks stood beside the red SUV. His accident notebook remained open in one hand. But he wasn't writing anymore. His eyes stayed fixed on Maya Johnson. Only minutes earlier, he had politely dismissed everything she said. Now, the child she insisted was inside the SUV was standing safely beside his mother because she refused to stop paying attention. A firefighter closed the SUV's hood after extinguishing the small electrical fire. "Battery wiring overheated after the collision," he explained. "Nothing major. But if it had continued." He looked toward the burned insulation beneath the hood. This could have become a much bigger problem. Daniel quietly nodded. He understood exactly what that meant. The little boy hadn't been rescued from a dramatic explosion. He had been removed before a dangerous situation had the chance to become one. Sometimes, that was what real heroism looked like. Not reacting after disaster. Preventing it. The boy's mother, Sarah Collins, finally walked toward Maya. Her hands still trembled. Tears streaked across her face. She stopped only inches away. Her voice broke. "I didn't even remember he was still asleep." She covered her mouth. "The airbags. I hit my head. I was so confused." Maya gently smiled. "You're both safe. That's all that matters." Sarah looked at her son. Then back at Maya. "You saved my little boy." Maya slowly shook her head. "I just noticed him." Sarah reached forward and hugged her tightly. The small crowd surrounding the intersection quietly applauded. Not loudly. Not dramatically. Simply out of relief. Several people who had been recording the accident slowly lowered their phones. The story they thought they were watching had changed completely. Officer Brooks walked over. He removed his patrol cap. Something he rarely did while on duty. His voice was noticeably quieter. "Ms. Johnson." Maya turned toward him. "Yes, officer." He hesitated. Long enough for everyone nearby to realize this wasn't going to be another question. "I owe you an apology." She remained silent, giving him the chance to finish. "When you first approached me, I assumed you were mistaken. I believed I already had enough information." He looked briefly toward the red SUV. "You tried to tell me what you saw. I didn't listen." Maya answered gently. "You were busy." Daniel shook his head. "No. I was convinced. There's a difference." Those words settled heavily between them. Because he knew they were true. Just then, another patrol officer approached carrying a tablet. "Daniel. You'll want to see this." The screen displayed footage from a nearby city traffic camera. Several officers gathered around. The recording began 30 seconds before the collision. Everyone watched silently. The red SUV entered the intersection. The traffic light above it was clearly red. Without slowing, the SUV continued through. A pickup truck entered legally from the opposite direction. The collision followed exactly as Maya had described. The footage paused. Officer Brooks looked down. She had been right. From the very beginning. Another officer enlarged the image. There. A second camera angle showed the sidewalk. Maya stood waiting for the crosswalk signal. Facing directly toward the intersection. She had witnessed everything. Every detail. Every second. Daniel slowly exhaled. The evidence confirmed something that now seemed painfully obvious. The most accurate witness at the scene had been the one he trusted the least. One of the bystanders stepped forward. The same man who had quietly said earlier, "She's probably mistaken." He looked embarrassed. "I owe you an apology too." Maya smiled kindly. "You don't owe me anything." "I do. I judged you before I heard you." She answered softly. "It happens." The man lowered his eyes. "I won't do it again." Nearby, another woman quietly slipped her phone back into her purse. "I almost posted that video." She glanced toward Daniel. "I thought I was watching someone argue with the police." She looked at Maya. "I didn't realize I was watching someone save a child." Officer Brooks looked once more at the traffic camera footage. Then at Maya. "I keep thinking about something." She waited. "You weren't trying to prove me wrong." "No. You were trying to protect someone." Maya nodded. "I wasn't worried about being believed. I was worried about the little boy." Daniel lowered his eyes. Those words stayed with him. Because while he had been focused on determining who caused the accident, Maya had been focused on something far more important. Who still needed help. As the tow trucks cleared the intersection, traffic slowly began moving again. The afternoon chaos faded. The flashing lights became fewer. Paramedics prepared to leave. Before getting into the ambulance for a precautionary evaluation, Sarah carried her son over to Maya one last time. The little boy wrapped both arms around Maya's neck. "Thank you." His small voice was barely above a whisper. Maya smiled warmly. "You're welcome, buddy. Be nice to your mom." He nodded seriously. "I will." Everyone nearby laughed softly. It was the first laughter anyone had heard all afternoon. Officer Brooks quietly closed his notebook. He looked at the first page. Across the top he had written, "Witness statement, unconfirmed." He stared at the words for several seconds. Then drew a single line through them. Beneath it, he wrote something entirely different. First witness to see the whole truth. As he closed the notebook, he realized the biggest mistake he had made that afternoon wasn't questioning Maya Johnson. It was believing that confidence in his own judgment mattered more than listening to someone who had seen what he hadn't. 5 weeks later, the intersection looked completely different. Morning sunlight stretched across fresh crosswalk lines. Cars moved smoothly through the green lights. Parents walked children toward a nearby elementary school. The chaos of that summer afternoon had quietly become another ordinary day. But inside the Atlanta Police Training Center, the memory hadn't faded. Officer Daniel Brooks stood before a room filled with new recruits. Fresh uniforms. Fresh badges. Fresh confidence. Behind him, a large projector displayed a single still image from his body camera. Maya Johnson. Standing on the sidewalk. Calm. Patient. Trying to speak. Captain Lisa Morgan addressed the class. Today's lesson isn't about traffic enforcement. She looked around the room. It's about listening. The body cam footage began. The recruits watched Daniel interviewing drivers. They watched Maya politely waiting for her turn. Then, they heard her voice. "Officer, the red SUV caused the crash." The video continued. Daniel asking her to wait. Maya stepping back without arguing. Then trying again. I saw the entire accident. The room remained silent. Several recruits exchanged uncomfortable glances. Everyone knew what was coming. The footage showed Maya pointing toward the SUV. Daniel returning to his notebook. Then, the faint ribbon of smoke rising from beneath the hood. The little boy appearing behind the tinted rear window. Maya running toward the vehicle. The rescue. The mother's tears. The room stayed completely quiet until the screen went black. Captain Morgan folded her hands. What was the biggest mistake? One recruit answered immediately. The officer dismissed a witness. The captain nodded. Partly. Another recruit raised her hand. He assumed he already understood the situation. Better. Then she looked toward Daniel. What do you think? Daniel took a slow breath. The biggest mistake was believing I had finished listening before she had finished speaking. No one wrote anything down. They simply listened. Captain Morgan smiled gently. We invited someone here today. The person who taught us that lesson. The classroom door opened. Maya Johnson walked inside. She wasn't wearing running clothes this time. She wore a simple navy blouse. Cream slacks. Comfortable flats. Nothing about her suggested hero. Nothing about her demanded attention. Yet every officer in the room instinctively stood. She smiled modestly. You don't have to do that. Captain Morgan laughed. I think they wanted to. The room relaxed. Maya stepped beside the projector. The paused image still showed her standing at the intersection. Trying to be heard. She looked at it for a moment. Then turned toward the recruits. I've been asked one question many times. Were you upset? Several officers nodded. She smiled softly. Of course. I was human. A few recruits laughed quietly. But I wasn't thinking about proving someone wrong. She looked around the room. I kept thinking about one thing. What if I stopped trying? And I'm right? Silence filled the room. Sometimes. The cost of staying quiet isn't paid by you. It's paid by someone who needs help. She paused. So keep speaking. And just as importantly, keep listening. One young recruit slowly raised his hand. What made you notice the little boy? Maya smiled. It wasn't one thing. It was several tiny things. The backpack. The movement behind the tinted glass. The smell of overheated plastic. She shrugged gently. Details whisper. You only hear them when you're paying attention. Nearly every recruit wrote down the sentence. Daniel noticed. He had written the exact same words in his own notebook weeks earlier. After the presentation, the recruits slowly left the room. Many stopped to thank Maya. Others quietly shook Daniel's hand. Not because he had handled everything perfectly, but because he had chosen to learn from his mistake instead of hiding it. Outside the academy, Daniel caught up with Maya. I've wanted to ask you something. She smiled. Go ahead. Why didn't you file a complaint? She looked across the parking lot where children were climbing into a school bus. Then answered calmly. Because I wasn't interested in ending a career. I was interested in improving one. Daniel looked down for a moment. I almost ignored the most important witness I'd meet all year. Maya gently corrected him. No. You almost ignored a person. The witness was only part of who I was. Daniel smiled. She was right. Again. Later that afternoon, Daniel returned to the same intersection where everything had happened. School had just ended. Children crossed safely through the crosswalk. Crossing guards smiled. Parents waved. Among them, he recognized Maya. She was leading a group of elementary students across the street during a neighborhood safety program. One little boy held her hand. Another proudly carried a green dinosaur backpack. Daniel smiled the moment he noticed it. Maya looked up. Their eyes met across the crosswalk. Neither of them spoke. Neither needed to. The traffic light turned green. Cars began moving again. Life continued. As it always does. Daniel watched the children disappear safely onto the sidewalk. Then quietly touched the small notebook in his uniform pocket. Inside, one sentence remained underlined. Listen before you decide. It had become more than a reminder. It had become the way he wore the badge. Because the greatest lesson of that day wasn't about an accident. Or a child. Or even a rescue. It was about the danger of believing you've already heard the whole story. Officer Daniel Brooks thought Maya Johnson was mistaken. She proved that courage isn't measured by who speaks the loudest, but by who keeps speaking when no one is listening. And sometimes, the voice that saves a life is the one almost ignored.